What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and I'm here to let you know that You Won't Be Alone is No Perfect Movie. And I was almost alone in the theater, but one other guy just had to show up. Then again, one would think more people would show up on a Sunday afternoon, but that's another story. So You Won't Be Alone is about a feral witch named Navina who lives in 1800s Macedonia, who has been raised in this lonely, dark, and dreary cave until she's suddenly freed and supposedly abandoned by her creator, Old Maid Maria, played by Anamaria Marinca. I pretend to be surprised that I don't know how to pronounce Romanian. And as she comes across several different civilians as she's beginning to explore daily life in a way that I am not going to spoil because it's a legitimately ingenious special effect, she discovers that she has the ability to shapeshift into other people. And as opposed to wreaking havoc like a stereotypical witch, she decides to try blending in and assimilating into human society despite the daily challenges that come with life, along with Old Maid Maria's occasional interference because, well, again, reasons that I don't want to get into. And I didn't see any trailers for this. I had no idea this was even coming up until my buddy Josh and I were going through a list of 2022 releases, and I saw that there was this one where it was supposedly a folk horror starring Noomi Rapace as a feral shapeshifting witch, and that alone piqued my interest, especially having seen her in Lamb, which was a movie that was so good it came this close to making it into my top 20 list. And the interesting thing is, having seen both of them, I can safely say that they have a lot of similar qualities in that Lamb and You Won't Be Alone are not really horror movies. They're more human dramas about an abnormal creature that is trying to basically blend into human society despite the fact that it is literally impossible no matter what they do. And the monster movie tropes that each movie incorporates mainly serve through the body transformations and violence as metaphors for the difficulties of adjusting to human society. And they each have a filmmaking style that's reminiscent of a famous cult director, especially because both of these are directorial debuts. Lamb has the exact same surreal, deadpan atmosphere of a Yorgos Lanthimos movie, but the reason I like it more than really any Yorgos Lanthimos movie is that it's so much more self-aware about the absurdity of the environment through its sense of humor and is considerably more subtle in its messages. It never took itself too seriously, and in my opinion, that's why it was a great movie. But You Won't Be Alone is basically what would happen if Terrence Malick tried to make a horror film. And that's the main reason A, I couldn't get into it, and B, I felt like the director, Goran Stolevski, was trying to copy off of Malick as opposed to coming up with his own unique vision. Because this has every single cliche that Terrence Malick is known for, praised for, and like me, constantly ridiculing him for. Because honestly, this style as a whole just isn't really my thing. And I should make it absolutely clear. If you do like this kind of style, good for you. There are some movies where, despite what I just said, I can make exceptions. Trey Edward Schultz's Waves in particular is one that I absolutely loved because Schultz understood what worked and what didn't about those certain directing techniques. But and this is probably going to come across more as a rant on why I don't like Terrence Malick films as opposed to what I don't like about this movie, but it's incredibly hard not to because Stolevski makes it so clear who he's paying tribute to and what his filmmaking inspirations are. The problems I have with the directing style in this film is that, for one, there is way too much handheld camera work that initially was just distracting, especially because Stolevski has this habit of framing characters just on the edge of the aspect ratio in order to make scenes come across as a little bit more unsettling and make a more dreary atmosphere. And there are some moments where it does work, but after a while, it actually becomes very nauseating with how much they shake the camera as Navina is doing the most basic mundane things like trying to plow a field or hang up some laundry because, you know, those things had to be intensified, right? And just like Malick, there are a majority of plot points that are told mainly through montages of either close-ups of nature or wide shots for our main character embracing the beauty of nature, followed by these very, very soft-spoken, poetic inner monologues that tell you every single thought and feeling that Navina is pondering. And because the majority of plot points are told through montage, it's incredibly difficult to judge the actors' performances because their character work is constantly being overshadowed by the phlegmatic and incredibly fast-paced editing. You never get to experience the exact same emotions or daily routines that our characters experience, especially with the protagonist. And when we do, it's the same scenario over and over again, where kind of like when Ariel loses her voice in The Little Mermaid, she is so curious about daily life that whenever she tries to experiment or mimic the exact same actions of others, she leads to making so many awkward decisions that everyone just brushes off because they think that she's gone mad, even though there's one point where one of the people that she's impersonating is under suspicion of being a witch. I don't know why that plot point was brought up because it goes absolutely nowhere. And the last point, and this one really drives me insane the most when it comes to Malik's vision, the inner voiceover monologues go back and forth from being so blatantly obvious in terms of the exposition that it's insulting to listen to. You feel like you're being talked down as opposed to actually being trusted to understand what the characters are going through, because the narration just drowns out every single image that is beautiful to look at and tells the story on its own, but then they make it so oversimplified that it's embarrassing. Or sometimes the metaphors are so cryptic and artsy that they don't often correlate with what's happening on screen, and you're just sitting there going, what are you saying? What does this have to do with anything that's happening on screen? At least with a movie like Waves, with all of the sweeping steady cam tracking shots and large scale montages, the movie told the story visually first, dialogue second, and the characters, whenever they had to speak, actually talked like average everyday humans. The only variation that Stolevski does in this that is kind of hit and miss is that because this takes place, I think, in 1800s Macedonia, they don't get too specific on what the time period is. The script is written in an older dialect where the sentence structure comes across as sloppy compared to modern day speech. And if it was just told from Navina's perspective, I think that obviously would have worked because she's been raised in one location only, has barely been taught to do any basic motor skills, let alone communication skills. She kind of reminded me of that one girl named Jeannie. Did anybody read about her in social studies in high school? Because I still remember some of the stuff my teacher taught me about her in particular, and wow, this brought a lot of comparisons in my opinion. It would make a lot more sense if that older sentence structure was mainly told from her point of view, because the lack of communication skills and the fact that she doesn't actually have any on-screen dialogue whatsoever given the mental state that she's in actually made me feel a lot of sympathy for her when she's trying to integrate into society. But then you have the other villagers who don't often do it but still talk in a similar fashion to her. It just took me out of the experience, which is a shame because this movie does have a lot of good things going for it. Navina is basically played by 4 different actors, and all of them do a great job that's reminiscent of the 3 actors from Moonlight in that they all give consistent performances in regards to their facial expressions, their body language. I would say their line delivery, but considering all 4 of these actors have to carry a performance, matching each other's tone while also giving subtle variations to show some progress or lack thereof in Navina's character arc without any dialogue, that was unbelievably impressive, and I think all of these actors deserve major credit for it. I would pronounce every single one of them, but based on my pronunciation skills, I'm just going to put their names in the video right here. Definitely check them out. They deserve all the credit. But the marketing will have you believe that Noomi Rapace is supposed to be the most impactful version of Navina, because I'm pretty sure it's her, but I could be mistaken. I think that is her on the theatrical poster, and she's the only actor in this cast who has had any international superstardom with the original Dragon Tattoo movies. She was in Sherlock Holmes 2, but don't let the marketing fool you. She's actually one of, if not the most underutilized performers of Navina, and that pissed me off because I do think she is an underrated actress, especially after having seen what she can do in Lamb. But regardless, all 4 main actors do a great job. The scene stealer, in my opinion, was Anamaria Marinca as Old Maid Maria. I absolutely loved seeing her every time she was on screen. And this is the kind of movie that's more dramatic than horrifying, but whenever she makes an appearance, she instantly gives this sense of unease and dread towards the film. And some of that has to do with the makeup and prosthetics on her, which is so good that I'm not even going to show pictures on screen because I absolutely love the design and you should go in blind without having seen any of those details. But Marincha absolutely relishes the joy of being evil, having to play all these different psychological tricks on her victims, mainly for fun, but also to leave less of a trace of her existence. But as the movie progresses and more is slowly revealed about her backstory, it becomes clear that while she is taunting and making life more difficult for Navina while she's trying to integrate into human life, when she doesn't technically have to, it becomes clear that there's more of a personal reason, particularly towards the end where we see her in a state of vulnerability that makes her design and her overall personality considerably more tragic. And I gotta say, this movie also is really good at blending in CGI and practical effects when it comes to the witch scenes whenever they have to commit an act of murder against one of their victims. There aren't that many scenes, unfortunately, so they don't have to rely that much on CGI, but there are entire transformation sequences that happen in one shot where the textures of the CGI were so seamless and authentic that my jaw was legitimately on the floor. And as I said in the intro, the way that Navina can shapeshift into other human beings that involves a little bit of physical violence and a little bit of self-harm towards her, I can't believe I haven't seen that in any movie before. I don't know if that's part of the mythology and folklore that comes with the culture in this movie, but if it is, it's utilized to perfection. So there are a lot of great qualities that You Won't Be Alone has, but unfortunately, for the most part, it's a chore to sift through just because it decides to go for one specific niche type of art house style that doesn't really work with everybody. And unfortunately, it didn't work for me. I thought that the montages were too fragmented, simplistic, completely unnecessary when the visuals were already telling the story for itself, and I felt that more silence and nuance within the story would have made it a lot more impactful, similar to Lamb. I know I'm comparing this movie to other films, but at the same time, it makes it so easy and challenging to compare it to review the movie as a whole, as a standalone film. So, for all those reasons, I'm going to give You Won't Be Alone a 2 out of 5. But if you do like the Terrence Malick style, I'd highly recommend checking it out. I think you're going to have a good time if that's the case. Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen You Won't Be Alone, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. Be sure to stay tuned for more reviews, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.